In this tutorial, Unity 3D tutorial, we're going to look at Minesweeper. So you know the game. So we're going to have three options here for different columns and rows, right? So the game is played. On the first try, you're always going to get a break. You're never going to get a mine. I'm just here showing you if you lose, if you hit a mine, you're going to go through the lost animation. And if you try to win, so let me give this a try. I only put 3 mines here to make this a little easier. Let's see. So the other thing that you can do is if you right click, we're going to give you an option to mark the mines, right? So here I'm looking at this and I said, okay, that's got to be a mine. So this can't be a mine down below it. Okay, now this is a 50-50 chance right now. So I'm going to take a shot and see what happens, but I chose the wrong one, right? So it's not logical always. Sometimes a little luck. Okay, let's try it again, right? So as you see in that one, I didn't hit a mine, but there is a mine close by, right? So that's still okay. So here it is. I'm going to mark, right? Now the marking doesn't really do anything. It's just for you. The game doesn't respond to the marking. So here we go. That's got to be, let's see, one of these got to be a bomb. Let's see what I'm doing over here. So anyway, looks like I'm giving this some thought. So one more mine, right? Let's see if I can figure this out. So that's got to be a mine right there. Yeah, those are the two. So here we go. Now this is a win. So we have an animation here, and that's it, right? So that's the game. You're familiar with it. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to do this all in C#. So we're going to have a couple of different techniques. We're going to use object-oriented programming, which is, in this case, we have a block, we have a controller. We're going to use delegates in this program. The delegates are used to control the various states of the game. So as you see, we have game setup, level setup, player move, etc. So that really gives you gives you firm control of where you are in the game. The level is the level controller, right? So we have a lot of different sprites and blocks and etc. So let's start a new game. Make a 2D game. We'll call that Minesweeper. I think I have one already, so I'll call it Minesweeper 2. And the next thing we're going to do, we have a scenes folder, but we want to organize a little more, a little better. We're going to make a few more folders. So we're going to do one called prefab, and another one we're going to call scripts. Put our scripts in there, and the last one will be one called resources. So those are our folders, and the other thing I'm going to rename this one to main menu. Main scene, excuse me, and I'm going to go to the game and I'm going to make it 16:9 ratio. Okay, so let's set up the main menu. First thing we'll do is we'll add a background image, and we'll set the canvas settings to screen space camera and drag the camera over. So these two will be linked together. Let's resize the image. We're just going to use a basic color here for the image. If you want to drag your own image into that image slot, that'll work too. So I'm just going to choose a color here. Then the next thing, let's make a button, right? So just resize this a little bit and change the text to level 1. So we'll start with this button, but now we need some code to make this button work. So let's get some scripts. The first script we're going to make is called a controller. This will be the central brain of our game, you might say, right? So controller, and in the controller, first thing we're going to do is we're going to break this up into regions, so it'll be a little bit easier to organize, right? So I'm going to make a region variables, and let's make some variables. The first set of variables is going to be the various game states. So as you see, we have idle, setup, player move, won, lost. These are all our game states, right? These are our enumerated types. Next, we're going to add our delegates. So the way this is going to work, our delegates are going to control the functions that run at different parts of the game. So these are just functions that we're going to select between. So you see, so throughout the game, play game is going to always run, but it'll be different based on the game state. So you just have to see how that works in a moment. So let's set up our delegates, right? The first thing is we need to select the different parts of the game. So let's make a gameplay region, and let's set up a function called change game state, something like that. So based on the parameter, we'll choose a different function based on that parameter. So let's have a switch statement. We'll insert a switch statement based on the game, the parameter, and then based on that parameter, we'll choose a different function. So in this game, if your parameter is game setup, we'll run the function game setup, or in other words, play game will be equal to game setup function. Okay, so now we actually need that function. Right now, that function, we're just going to have it print something on the screen or in a console, right? During the game setup anyway, we're not doing anything. Okay, let's try the next one, the menu. So the next set will be the menu, and we'll need a function for that. But let's set up all the other ones too, right? So all the other cases, player move, and idle. So those are all our cases, right? And now we need the functions. So let's add the other functions, and we have the main function. We have, and they're, like I said, they're not going to do anything right now except just print something so we know where we are. Here is the level setup function, right? And the player move function, and in the idle. Okay, so we have this now. Let's now go and just add one more variable here, and that is the level num. It's going to be private, right? So we're going to make it private. In object-oriented programming, private means that it's not accessible from outside the function. So we're going to use a getter and setter here, region, to give everyone access to that. So this is good object-oriented programming practice, right? You control the access to the variable. So here it is. We have a level num, we have a return, and we have a set, or get and a set. Okay. So next is we need access to this controller throughout the game. Whatever level we're on, whatever scene we're on, we need access. So there's a singleton model that will help us do this. And the singleton model, you set up a static variable, and then you, through this function, make singleton, you make it undestroy, meaning you set it to be not to be destroyed as it goes through the different levels. Okay, so on awake, let's make that singleton, and we're done. So when you go back to the game after you do some coding, always check the console to see if there are any red marks here. As you see, I made a mistake here. I forgot a break at line 83, they say, or 86. So that'll take care of that, and then save, and then go back and see if all those clear up, okay? So now that we have the controller, we're ready to do the code for the button. So the code for the button is going to be called a menu handler, right? Or whatever we want to name it, right? But in this case, it'll be, well, I'm sorry, before we do that, let's actually put the controller into the game. So I make an empty and we drag the code over. So that is essential. You can have code, but if it's not in the game, it serves no purpose. Okay, so we have the empty, and the controller will stay from one scene to the next, right? So let's make a menu handler, and in the menu handler, we'll have a function. So we'll delete these start and update. We don't need those. So in the level handler, we'll have a function called select level. So that level, that variable level, will be different on every button. So whatever button you click will get a different number. Okay. Now that we have that, let's see what we should do with it, right? So the first thing is, once you click, we want to actually save that. So the controller will be saving that value. So when it moves down into the game, we'll be able to retrieve it. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is to actually move to the next scene, right? So to the levels, to the game scene. So what you do, is you have to use a scene manager to load the next scene, which is the game scene. We don't have that scene yet, but we will have it in a moment, right? So we move to the scene, and next, after that, we have to change the game state, right? So every time something happens, well, let's also import the scene manager library too, right? But now, once you have, once you're on that level in the game state, you have to actually change the variable. Let's take those scripts now and apply them. So we're going to make a new object. We're going to call a menu manager. We're going to grab that script, drag it over. Okay. Now we can go to the button, each button, or actually the button, and we're going to add that menu manager. So on click, we're going to add the menu manager into that slot. Go and apply the function. You can't see it, but you have a function called change level. Just look for it and you'll see it'll say, let's see, menu handler change level. We'll select level and we'll choose 0 for the first button, right? You'll see why 0 now 1. Okay, let's make a duplicate of this. Actually, I'll rename it level 1, and then let's make a duplicate. Now that we have everything set up, we'll drag it down. We'll drag this button down. And we have to change, of course, the text, right? So we have to go change the text of the button, and we also have to change the level. So let's make those changes. Level 2, and also we have to change that number that's being passed in. We'll do the same thing for the third one. And once that's done, we're actually ready to test it out, our navigation. Okay, later on you could take some time and organize this a little better. Right now I'm not going to really worry about this too much, right? We need, of course, a game scene. So I'm going to duplicate the scene that we have here, put it in the folder, right? Remove some of the things. We do need a level manager, but we don't need a controller. We don't need every button. We just need one button for us to go back to the main menu. So I'll change that to menu, change the text, move it up a little bit, Later on, we can find a good position for this. Maybe it's a little too big, the button, but we'll worry about that later. Let's just see how the navigation works, right? So we need to change that, but we need a function to go back to the main menu, right? So we have to go back to the game manager and get a new function for that, right? But as you see, the other thing is before you can actually play the game and go from scene to scene, you have to add those scenes to the build. So if you go to the preferences, you see you have to add those two scenes. Now, when I click and I go to the button, it looks like I have an error here, and it looks like I didn't set the actual game state, right? So that variable was never set. So let's set it up, right? So the function was null, so because we never set it up. Okay, so now we set it up, and let's give it a test. So now, as you see, but the menu has not been set up. So let's go to the game manager again and add a new function for going back to the menu. So we load the scene and we also change the game state to menu. Okay, let's save. And now we should be able to navigate back and forth between the scenes. But need to change that function. You can't see it, but it's the function called menu, right? So you choose the function called menu, and let's give it a run now. Okay,